Holy City Center Radio is episode 202, and I am your host, Christian Sanger. Today is Wednesday, December 13th, 2023. Hope you're having a great week. Not a lot going on here, nothing to report back, so let's just get into the news. Transgender students in South Carolina may soon be prohibited from using bath, locker, or changing rooms that align with their gender identity. 3 members of the conservative South Carolina House Freedom, in quotes, Caucus, filed a measure ahead of next year's session that would block transgender public school students from using bathrooms and facilities, such as locker rooms, shower rooms, changing rooms, and other sex-segregated spaces that differ from their sex at birth. Any public schools that violate the proposal could be sued within 2 years by non-transgender students who claim privacy transgressions that led to psychological, emotional, or physical harm. All right, couple points already. As usual, the House Freedom Caucus, as I always like to say, and I'm not alone in this, it's not unique, I didn't create this, but as they continually make clear, they really aren't so much for freedom at all. So they have a horrible name for themselves. Because this obviously is infringing on freedoms, as most of their attempted legislation does. The other thing here is that public schools that could violate this proposal could be sued within 2 years by any non-transgender students who claim, as I said at the end, any privacy issues that have led to psychological, emotional, or physical harm. So my question is well, what about any of that occurs in a bathroom, locker room, whatever, with people of, the same sex? So say they do this, that stuff can happen, within the same gender. It doesn't have to be, any, in their words, this isn't what I feel, but a cross gender, because obviously if you're transgender, you are that gender. But in their idea, these types of things just don't happen when transgender students are prevented from using bathrooms of their choosing. Of course not. Anytime kids are alone, stuff can happen. Again, of course, just an attack on transgender students. One of the people in the Freedom Caucus, Representative April Cromer, obviously Republican from Anderson, they said, quote, "This is common sense legislation. Boys are boys, girls are girls, and you have to use the bathroom and locker room that lines up with your gender." End quote. I agree, April. Whatever your gender is, you should be able to use that bathroom. I'm glad we're on the same page there. This is what happens when you have people who don't understand the issues, don't understand the appropriate terms, and don't know how to express what they're trying to say. She just, without realizing it, said that she believes that whatever your gender is, you should use that bathroom. I know what she was trying to say, of course, but this is my point. They don't even really understand the topic well enough to speak on it. But hey, as long as if something's different from them, someone's different community, no good. Got to stop them. She goes on to say this bill isn't aimed to punish a group, which obviously it is. I'll start that sentence over, though. She says the bill isn't aimed to punish a group that is clearly struggling with their mental health. It is to protect young girls from sharing a locker room with their fully grown male coach, which we saw in Pennsylvania. All right, so a couple things here. Obviously, it is intended to punish a group. They're constantly trying to pass legislation as it relates to transgender children, people, and adults as well. And then she goes on to say they're clearly struggling with their mental health. Well, they may be, but that being transgender isn't a mental health issue in and of itself. There could be issues that go alongside of it. So on the one hand, she does the whole boys are boys, girls are girls nonsense that people like to say, which obviously, is talking down to transgender students. Also then claims they're mentally ill. Again, talking down to them, but that says this isn't punishing them. Well, if it's not punishing them, the least you could do, if you truly believe that, is to stop talking down to them, making them, in her words, making them be less than. It's just these people, again, if they truly believe these things, and they may, what if you're trying to get across the point here that no, this is good for everybody. We don't want to punish anyone. Leave it at that. You don't need to go on and make these insensitive remarks that kind of make it seem like, oh no, okay, because you're claiming they're all mental ill and you had to get that little opinion of yours in there, and then also had to throw out this whole one single incident that happened in Pennsylvania, uh, where you're trying to demonize transgender, specifically a transgender woman. She said a fully grown male coach. It actually was a transgender woman. So again, she's not using the proper terms, which is goes back to the point that the cruelty is the point. It is a punishment. It is because you don't understand or you're scared or whatever. Again, I understand a parent's concern on the face value. You want your kid to go to school. If they're using the restroom, of course you wouldn't want a grown adult of the opposite gender in there. I wouldn't want a grown adult alone in a bathroom, regardless of gender. But generally in bathrooms and schools, there's multiple kids in there. So generally adults aren't in there causing any problems when there's obviously multiple children there. But this whole trans people are pedophiles or sexual predators is also a trope that isn't true. As far as percentage wise, it's no different than any other population. And so again, they just can't help themselves when talking about anything related to trans legislation. They claim that it's not to harm anyone. We're just we're trying to make things good for everybody involved, but they just cannot help themselves to not take little digs, which just negates their claim of, oh, hey, no, I'm not trying to single out people. We're just trying to make things great for everybody. When you get those digs in, it shows what your true feelings are, and she just couldn't help herself. And also, going back to that story in Pennsylvania, it was a transgender woman who was a coach at this school in Pennsylvania. It still could be. I didn't see the end result. Did not sexually assault any students. Did not touch them. Did not make comments to them. They simply changed in a locker room with them. They were wearing underwear, so it's not even like they were naked. And that's the story. Some kids apparently maybe were uncomfortable with it. That's fine. I'd be uncomfortable with any uh, coach changing in the same locker room as me. I wouldn't have liked that, again, regardless of gender. But that was it. That was the story. This wasn't some sexual predator. There wasn't some incident that happened involving a student or students or anything like that. That was the end of it. But the way she throws it out there makes it seem like there was this huge controversy where a man was pretending to be trans just to get in here into a locker room and do something nefarious. And that wasn't what happened at all. Another representative, obviously Republican. Every member of this caucus is Republican. Melissa Oremus from Aiken is a co-sponsor of the bill, and she said, "quote We've lost our way when we start catering to a crazy instead of protecting the innocence of our children. The left is all about safe spaces. Well, a bathroom should be one of them." End quote. So again, right at the front, catering to crazy. They just can't resist like making these little comments. And again, then saying protecting the innocence of our children, as if every trans person, regardless of age, is some predator, as if there's people running around saying they're trans, but they're not, solely to get into spaces with children. I mean, it's just not happening. Now, when I say that, yes, I'm sure there is an incident or a couple incidents that have happened over the years, but this isn't like a major problem. This isn't a thing that's actually really going on day to day, week to week, month to month. Just like I could find stories of, straight cisgender men or women who prey on children. That happens as well, but you don't see them. Why is it the trans adults is always what you're afraid of going in the bathroom? Shouldn't you be saying any adult? It shouldn't matter. So again, it's they're claiming not to try to demonize anyone, and that's exactly what they're doing by singling out a group and also by making these just unnecessary comments. Meanwhile, on the other side, transgender advocates say the bill could have a reverse effect when it comes to who's being protected. Jace Woodrum, who's the director of South Carolina ACLU, said, quote, transgender students as a part of our school communities or excuse me, I'll start that over. Quote, transgender students are a part of our school communities, and like other students, they're there to learn. They need to be able to use the restroom, the locker room that matches the gender they live every day without being singled out for discrimination and harassment. And to be quite honest, forcing transgender students into restrooms that don't match their gender identity puts their safety at risk. So, we've seen that with the violence against transgender people, regardless of age. It's disproportionate. And Woodrum's point is well taken. Uh, you could be putting them at risk, but they don't care about that. As usual, the Freedom Caucus is trying to take away freedom. They're not trying to fight for everyone's safety or freedoms, just people like themselves. And that's so inherent here. And again, they try to hide behind this cloak of, oh, well, I guess you want, and it's always a man. They're never worried that a woman would do this. I don't know what that says or what that means. And I get it. I mean, men are, generally you see these stories about sexual predators and things, and most of the time they're male. I mean, I don't have any data to back that up, but that's what it seems like in the news. And don't get me wrong, I know there are incidents with women who are sexual predators. You see sometimes teachers, for instance, that are women who get in trouble for having sexual relations with students. But I don't know why that's always the man, pretending. It's just weird that's where they always go. But they try to hide behind that, oh, well, if you think that this is okay, you must think it's okay for a grown man to go into a little girl's bathroom at a school. And you're like, no, you don't understand. That's not what anybody is saying at all. But they go to that extreme to make it seem like you're this crazy person. And again, I think they would do better and would be better served if they try to do these things without the little digs and the little comments. It just negates what they claim they're trying to do, which makes it harder for people to come along and say, like, yeah, okay, well, yeah, we can do that. That makes sense. So I mean, I shouldn't be giving them free advice, but I think they would do better if they could just stop that. But again, that's the point. They don't care. They claim not to be demonizing, but then they will say these people are mentally ill, that they're any trans student is just confused, that we're if we do anything to support them, that's crazy. I mean, it's clear what their actual standpoint is. The Charleston County School District's Board of Trustees on Monday appointed Michelle Simmons as the district's new chief academic officer. This comes weeks after community pushback. You may remember Simmons has been serving as the interim chief academic officer since July 2022. And prior to taking the leadership position, she worked for the district as a teacher and a principal for 2 decades. On Monday, there was a 5-3 vote, and it comes after 2 months of pushback from the community. So this kind of got lost in the drama of the former superintendent Eric Gallion. But that meeting, some of the meetings where they were talking about Dr. Gallion, in one of them they brought up Michelle Simmons and refused to move her out of the interim role, and it seemed like it was related to Superintendent Eric Gallion's issues that they were having with him. And unlike that situation, it seems the board, more specifically the Moms for Liberty back portion of it, some of them actually listened to the community and actually decided to vote for something the community wanted instead of trying to push their own personal agenda. So good for, the ones that did change their mind on this, but obviously still a 5-3 vote. Now, that just for reference, that meeting I mentioned was that September 25th one, if you want to go back and listen to the episode or reread some articles from that time about the whole thing. But again, it kind of got lost in all the other drama involving the superintendent. And speaking of Dr. Gallion, when he filed a lawsuit that has since been dropped, he did tell then board chair Pam McKinney that he wanted to make that position permanent for Simmons. Now, Monday's appointment of the position was discussed behind, you guessed it, closed doors during an executive session. That was then followed by public comments that showed overwhelming support for Simmons. So again, the community was actually listened to this time, and they were so excited, and the community tends not to get their way with this board, so they were so excited they actually erupted into applause after the decision was made. So congrats sort of to the board, for finally doing something they're supposed to do, which is listen to the community, take that feedback and actually process it and take it into account when you're making a decision. I know, a wild idea when you're in an elected position, but that's what you're supposed to be doing. Meanwhile, there will be some update to this story by the time you listen to this podcast, but we don't know how significant that update will be. The town of Mount Pleasant, it has a meeting tonight, and they are going to talk about proposed hate intimidation ordinance, I should say, which would enhance penalties for offenses committed on the basis of race, religion, sexual orientation, etc. So that's up for public discussion on Tuesday night. Yeah, obviously you'll be listening to this on Wednesday, so there could have been some movement on this. I'll update you with any significant changes on future episodes. The proposed ordinance comes just a few months after, you may remember, hundreds of anti-Semitic flyers were distributed in a Mount Pleasant neighborhood. It prompted a police investigation. There really hasn't been any updates, at least none that they're providing to the public on that situation. It's actually happened multiple times in Mount Pleasant. Although this is called a hate intimidation ordinance, more simply, we tend to call it hate crime legislation. Of course, you may remember that South Carolina is one of only 2 states in the country that does not have any hate crime legislation. The other one is Wyoming, I believe. So just shameful that we're one of 2 states that doesn't have this. It's been pushed by different groups, including the Charleston Jewish Federation. They've been advocating for local town and city hate crime ordinances, especially since their efforts on the state level are not going well. There is a bill which has been named the Clementa C. Pinckney Hate Crimes Act, named after the former reverend of the Mother Emanuel Church, which would establish a very similar set of rules that I just mentioned with the ordinance, which would enhance penalties for certain violent crimes when the offender intentionally selects a victim due to the offender's belief or perception regarding the victim's race, color, religion, sex, gender, national origin, sexual orientation, or physical or mental disability. Unfortunately, that bill has been stalled in the state Senate. It did pass the House in this past March, so that was a nice step, but it's just stalled in the Senate. As usual, people are trying to hold it up for ridiculous reasons, and hopefully this is something that will actually get passed in the next session. As I said, one of only 2 states without hate crime legislation is pretty shameful. That'll do it for this edition of Holy City Center Radio. I hope you have a great rest of your week. Can't wait to talk to you on Friday. If you have a chance, please rate and review the podcast, subscribe, anything you can do. I greatly appreciate it. You can also go to patreon.com/Holy City Center to support all things HCS. Big thank you to Lindsay Marie Collins of LMC Sound System for producing this and every episode of Holy City Center Radio. And also a big thank you to Tyler Boone, whose music you hear in each and every show. I will speak to you all in just a couple days. Until then, good night. Good luck.